And we hold out and say, you tell me how you do it at your place. Just like you do it, we'll do it out here. And a lot of times the answer doesn't come. If it does come, it's at the age-old, very humongous cost or most impossible situation. Thank you.
This is one of the, I'm representing a service provider for ITS services. And one of our key challenges, I would say, is really when we are serving our client across multiple geographies, and if those geographies are the ones that are strongly regulated with data protection laws. And now the real challenge is not just the data protection laws, but the real challenge is trying to justify and the amount of redundant efforts that go in terms of justifying our compliance, our adherence to compliance through multiple audits. Some of those things that we can really, when the set of controls that we actually exercise at our premises are just the same. But we go through these multiple audits just to prove ourselves again and again that we are being compliant. So I think that's one of the key challenges we face.
Thank you. See, I think I have spent many years, overseas as well as in India. First is we feel when you go to large organizations, you think everybody knows India. Still, perception of India, when you go to some of the developed countries, many of them don't know. On the ground level, you go to a chief security officer, he has no clue how our infrastructure looks and how some of our security controls are. Organizations which have presence in India, manufacturing organizations and some of the other high-tech organizations, they know India. If the organization doesn't know India, first challenge is to change their perception about India. And the way typically we do it, to invite them to India. Once they see the infrastructure, the process, the controls, I think every instance their view changes. Second problem you face is typically the security organization of the client is supposed to be paranoid, right? Especially when things are going 8,000-10,000 miles away. And if the outsourcing is a top-down directive, it becomes easier. If it is not, if some part of client organization is trying to outsource on its own, always it's very, very difficult because connecting a network to network or getting as simple as a user ID, it takes days. So the second part is once you have changed the perception about India, going and working with the client security organization to convince them about processes and controls and finally achieve the minimum you require for offshoring is the next bit of challenge you face in outsourcing.
I don't particularly belong to the service provider community, but I work with most of the service providers and see most of the challenges live. And if I were to bucket some of the key challenges faced by the service providers in India, the first, apart from what has been mentioned all along, the first would be the inability of organizations to take a strategic view of information security. Many a times it is at an operational or a tactical level, not at a strategic level. And that, I would say, is probably one of the key challenges that organizations face. The second, as Mr. Tipton was talking, was around the people, awareness creation amongst people, and most importantly, the career pathing of many of the security professionals. Where do they aspire to grow, and what ultimately is the role that they will grow into is a big question mark amongst the security professionals. And the last, if I look at the contracting process, most of the overseas customers coming from the mature market have got a very, very tight, strong contracting process. But when it comes to our end, I find that is a fairly weak process, and that is probably another challenge that organizations will have to look at very, very seriously.
Thank you, Terry.
I'm representing the outsourcing organization. And if you look at an organization which outsources the work, what are we trying to protect? We're broadly trying to protect two types of data. One is our intellectual capital, which is our design data around the products and stuff like that, which is to be consumed internally. The second type of data that we try to protect is the customer data. So the second type of data is more for financial services businesses where you have credit card customers and things like that. So that is driven more by regulatory authorities. So the challenge when it comes to outsourcing is how do you hold or create processes with your outsourcing partner and hold them to the same gold standards that you hold your own organizations to. So I think one of the things that we did was develop a very formal program around choosing the outsourcing partners who have that kind of scale to put in people, process, and technologies and make sure that the data is secure. And again, the challenge compounds when you offshore it. For example, if you're outsourcing an activity and the outsourcing partner is sitting in your own premises, you feel that much more comfortable. But when you ship this across the globe and your outsourcing partner is thousands of miles away and in a different geographical and time zone, then your comfort level basically decreases exponentially because your sphere of control on how you make sure that your data is secure is very less. So that's where the challenge comes in for the outsourcing companies to work with the companies to which they outsource the work to make sure that they have the same set of processes and they have the technologies in place to make sure that the data is secure.
Okay. I should say represent the customers. So I think we have challenges pretty much in each of our areas. It's not specific to, or against service providers or regulators. I think there is a challenge amongst each one of us. The challenge I see from a regulatory framework mechanism is earlier we never had probably an act which is kind of amended right now has included a lot of sections. So the challenge moving forward would be to see how do we implement this regulatory framework, how will it play out. So a good example here and there would definitely help from a regulatory perspective. The second, from a service provider perspective, I would like to share the other colleagues' view here is how do we get our service providers to work with our processes and standards. So coming from an organization which is kind of 100 plus years old, 50 plus years old, an IT organization, we have a set of processes which are built over a period of time, taking into account all the rules and regulations across the globe, wherever we operate, and finding the right partner who could really scale up and comply with your level of processes and tools is pretty important, and that's vital and critical for us. And that continues to be a challenge anyway. The third is pretty much internal. Most of the times, as customers, we are always driven by cost primarily. And when it comes to offshoring, the cost is a primary driver. But as Terry said, I think slowly we are also getting into a mindset now of getting the strategy framework on place rather than just looking at cost. I think earlier it used to be cost, and then kind of start doing some offshoring work. But I think now it's more of look at a risk assessment, a balance, and then do it. So again, cost will continue to be a primary factor, but how do we bring in the security assessment and how do we influence that decision is going to be a challenge.
Thank you. A very good evening to all of you. I come from the telco industry where we have outsourced to a service provider